Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to a trade and session recap for Euro Dollar on Wednesday, the 7th of December 2022. So daily chart, as we can see, is bullish. We know after a bullish break of structure, what do we expect? We expect a swing pullback to occur. We had a little bit of a pullback, but for me personally, I didn't classify this enough to be a swing pullback. So for me, it's just an internal pullback. And we have now come up to a very decent level of daily supply, which we can see originally broke structure and it flipped this level of demand here, right? Price came into demand, failed to do its job, and supply stepped into the market. So this is the extreme of the reaction leg of that flip. It's a very, very solid supply zone. Last couple of days, on Monday, I believe, we had a very strong sort of intraday reaction from that zone, as we can see with this large bearish candle here on the daily chart. So really, we're looking to play that pullback. Now, whether it will just be a small internal pullback down into demand before continuing, or perhaps we will see that shift in internal structure and we'll see a much deeper swing pullback, down into around these levels of demand before we then get that bullish eyeballs and continue. If that's what's going to happen, remains to be seen. But, if you trade like me, the majority of us are not looking to hold positions for that long. We're not looking to swing trade. So basically, I'm just trying to understand where we are within the higher time frames, and my expectation is potentially prices coming down to here before continuing higher. But of course, it doesn't have to. It could just come into this previous range, right? This demand range, and continue higher. But that's essentially what I'm looking to do, is place shorts down into that level. 4-hour chart gives us a little bit more color as to what to expect within that range we were just talking about. And we can see we had that initial reaction from the 4-hour supply within that daily supply towards the start of the week, I believe. Now, we have come into essentially this level of 4-hour demands, quite a big candle. And then yesterday, Monday and Tuesday, we had a bit of a reaction. That reaction has obviously failed to put in a higher high, and then we've broken and closed below that reaction. So we do now technically have a flip, right? We have a failed reaction from demand. So now this becomes our level of supply. Of course, you could draw the whole range if you want to. But yeah. So it's a bit tricky now because, I favor shorts. Why? Well, we're expecting that 4-hour swing pullback, right, after the boss, similar to what we just looked at on the daily chart. We're coming off a very significant level, so expecting really price to come down to sort of around these levels of discounted demand within the daily demand. So that's kind of where I'm expecting price is probably going to want to make its way to. Of course, it doesn't have to, right? Price could just reject this demand and continue higher. But it is looking more and more likely that it's going to come down to at least here, or potentially even, we could see that change in trend. Who knows? Now that we've had that, failed reaction from demand, we pushed lower, so we could look for shorts to continue down. But that said, we have had a failed reaction, but demand is still in play, right? The zone itself has not failed. We've just had a failed reaction. So what that means is that there still can be enough orders from within the zone to actually push price up. Now, whether there'll be enough to make a move like that, or if it will just be enough to push price up into supply before then continuing, who knows, right? So what you can kind of look for is, if this holds and you get nice lower time frame confirmations, is you can look for quick longs up into supply, take your profits or partials or whatever you want to do, and then look for shorts from within here to see if we're going to get that next move lower, or wait for price to break out of the supply, essentially get that bullish change of character on the 4-hour chart, and then we can look for longs again to try and target that high, okay? So when you kind of got price sandwiched between supply and demand, just be a little bit more nimble with your expectations, right? And that's why it's not really the most ideal place. Not ideal for shorts because you're shorting through demand. Not amazingly ideal for longs because it's not the best demand zone in the world, and we have had a failed reaction. So this is where you just want to be a little bit more nimble and perhaps wait for a bit more confidence than you normally would. So I'm just going to bring price forward to around pre-Frankfurt open, so just before 7 a.m. GMT, around here. Okay, so what do we have on the M15? Well, we can see to facilitate that 4-hour swing pullback, we can see that the M15 switched bearish. We got that swing pullback on Tuesday, and then we got another, or Monday and Tuesday, and then we got a break of that structure to the downside. We had a bit of a pullback here during Asia session, but kind of relative to recent price action, I just viewed that as an internal pullback. I didn't view that as a swing pullback yet. I want to see something a bit more significant. But yeah, we can see it was a bit tricky because we came into this weak demand. We did get a bullish eyeball during Asia, and then this strong internal low. You could have potentially, if you're trading Asia, you could have looked for longs from within here to try and play that swing pullback, but it ended up failing. It is what it is. We're not going to have 100% strike rate, and we've come down lower. So coming into the Frankfurt Open, where are we within price? Well, we're kind of in that extreme 4-hour low of that 4-hour demand. We've got M15 wick demand here. Now, I'm never a massive fan of just wick demand. You know, I want to be trading from ideally completely unmitigated single candle pivot zone. So this would be an example of that, right? Nothing's tapped into it at this moment. It's a full bodied candle. And then when price comes back into it, that's the type of zone I want to be trading from. Whereas here, it's just a wick. The distal of the zone, which should be, sorry, the top of the zone, right, has already been tapped into. It's already caused a move. So the question remains, you know, how many orders are really going to be left within here? And that's why I don't love them. But this is quite a big zone, right? It's a big wick, and it is at that 4-hour low of the demand. So, you know, there's a decent level, or there's a decent chance that price could react from here. So if you're a bit confused and there's a lot going on, there's kind of messy demand zones, you've got conflicting biases, just try and kind of forget everything and just ask yourself, like, what are the higher time frames trying to do? And again, super quick recap, 4-hour chart. I'll just zoom in. We know we're in the swing pullback phase and we're pulling back, and there's a decent chance we could come lower, but we are still within 4-hour demand, right, following that demand chain, right? So if this move is going to continue, this is a decent level in which you can continue from, or at the very least, we can look for a quick move up into the supply zone, okay? So there is some decent confidence there for longs on the 4-hour chart. If we look at the M15, where are we? What phase are we in? Well, just look at the most recent range. We know that this is our swing high, so we're bearish. We're bearish. Don't know why I can get my words out there. The internal structure at this point is also bearish, but we have had the swing breaker structure, so we know at any moment that swing pullback phase could kick in. Okay, but what we want to see is we want to see the internal structure first shift bullish. Right, we want to see that shift in the internal structure to really signal that we're in that pullback phase. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make here is we can continue to look for shorts and follow this bearish order flow, follow this bearish internal structure, but we know after that swing bust that it's very likely we could have that deeper pullback soon. And also we're coming kind of into that level on the 4-hour chart in which, you know, we could get that pullback up to this 4-hour supply zone, right? Remember that flip? And or the 4-hour chart could continue bullish from here, and then the M15 will switch bullish as well. So I know there's a lot there to kind of think about, especially if you're new to the style of trading. It can seem quite confusing, but the point I'm trying to make is that there's a decent amount of confluence to at least expect a bit of a bullish move from here. So what I was saying in my pre-session analysis, if you look at it, is for longs, I want to wait for a bit more confirmation. And I personally, want to wait. I know we switched bullish here, but then we switched bearish on the internal structure. I personally wanted to see this shift bullish again. So I wanted to see this high go, right? The internal structure shift bullish, then look for the pullback, and okay, now I'll consider longs depending on how it looks. And then I'll be happy to play the pullback play, up into that 4-hour supply zone. And that's kind of what I wanted to see. So you could get in before then and anticipate that move, but I personally wasn't happy to. Okay, so for longs, I knew I was going to wait for that. What about shorts? Can I get involved in shorts? Well, this is the current internal range we are within. So the internal and the swing are both bearish. So yes, if that internal bearish trend is going to continue, this would be your unmitigated extreme, right? In which we can look for those shorts from. So what I was saying is that I will sort of cautiously consider shorts from within here because I'm very mindful of the level we've come into and that we're expecting a swing pullback phase after the boss. Should be a bit lower. So, trying to short against this level is a bit tricky because we know that potentially could be the move ready to go. So cautiously looking for shorts from within here, basically. If that makes sense. I'm just going to hide this 4-hour demand from here for a minute just to kind of make it a bit more clean, okay? So that's basically my exact thought process coming into London. Not going to look for longs personally, really, until we at least see that movement. Then I'll look for the pullback to then get in on a long here, depending on how it shapes up. And for shorts, cautiously looking for shorts for a quick move. Because I'm aware of, we're coming off a level which we could push up higher. And that's it really. Obviously you can see that this is the internal range we're from within. So this is your strong internal high. The extreme's already been mitigated. We then had a sweep of that liquidity and a break of the internal structure. So for me, this is a decent level. Now there's no inducement in the leg. You want to see a structural pullback. So we know that there's structural liquidity behind there. In this instance, there wasn't. It's just a straight push. So we know when that happens that this zone can be used. Liquidity itself, right, can be induced. So when prices are putting back up to here, what can we look for to increase the probability that this POI won't get swept when there's no inducement? We can look for a strong liquidation on the M1, right? And we'll come to that in a minute for when we look for a potential entry. So this was a bit of tricky price action. I initially didn't really see this, but there were a few M15 chocks from within here. So this is an inside bar, so obviously it failed to break the previous candle's low. So we had that fractal pullback. Let me zoom right in for this. We did have a fractal pullback here, right? Then we pushed down. So that becomes our fractal high. So we obviously had a bullish change of character. We took the high. But then in that same candle, we then came down again and then we broke the low. Okay, so we had a bullish shock initially. That then becomes our new fractal low. Then we came down in the same candle and took the low. So we had a bearish change of character. So when we had the bearish shock down here, at that moment, this then became the fractal high. And the next thing that happened was the order in which it happened actually, when this was the fractal high, right? When it came down and broke the low. So I'll just draw that again. So we had an up movement and then we had a down movement, right? Where we had the bearish change of character here. At that moment, this was the active fractal high. Now, when the next M15 candle, this one at 7 a.m. GMT, started to print, what happened first was price continued the down movement, okay? And then it came up. So there was a bullish change of character here, okay? And then I believe price came and closed back down. Let's just have a look just to confirm I am right there. Might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Okay, looks like I'm wrong. If this is done, yes. So we had, I believe that was the bullish chock there. Then we just about had a bearish chock. Then we had a bullish chock. Okay, yeah. And then we had a bearish chock, right? So that's the order what happens. And this is actually the fractal high at this moment. So forgive me, I was wrong. So yeah, so then this would be your active fractal high on the M15. Okay. Bit of a tricky example, but it's a lot cleaner when you look on the lower time frames to confirm. And then boom, yeah. Then we had the bullish change of character. So now you can see it's a bit more, makes a bit more sense, right? So at this moment, you now have technically fresh M15 demand, right? That caused that M15 bullish change of character. Now, the internal structure, as we know, is bearish, right? We're trading between this low here and this high. And remember I was saying I was looking for shorts from within here to then potentially target that weak low for a quick move. Now, we've had a bullish change of character, but remember, changes of character just signals the start and end of internal pullback. So it makes sense we've had a chock because price is likely going to change character just to get up to here before continuing lower, okay? So still happy to cautiously look for shorts from within here. A bullish change of character wouldn't necessarily stop me from taking shorts from within here because I expect there to be a bullish change of character, right? Because price needs to pull back to here, and very often there will be a bullish change of character for price to be able to pull back. However, I didn't notice that had happened, so I didn't notice there was fresh demand. And when we came in here, if I had seen that I was trading right into this demand, I probably wouldn't have taken it. And it's because of this very specific scenario we are within, right? Because remember what I was saying at the start of this video, I'm very much anticipating that we could be about to switch bullish on internal structure because of the level that we've come into, because we've had that boss, and because we're expecting that swing pullback. So yes, you can keep following that bearish order flow and you can keep following the bearish internal structure, but when we've come into the extreme of that 4-hour demand and that M15 demand, you know, it's becoming lower and lower probability to keep following it. So when price comes up to here, then I'm looking for shorts. You're going to have to reassess of like, yes, this is a weak internal low at this moment because it hasn't broken internal high, but you are trading directly into M15 demand that, you know, could continue higher. So in this specific instance, it's not really looking that great to kind of short against that. So I probably wouldn't have taken it if I had noticed this, but as I keep saying, I hadn't noticed it. So we look at the M1. You know, when I was looking at this, I didn't have this blue box drawn on. So all I saw was, okay, price is coming up into here, up into this level. This is a weak low. So I'm going to look for basically that M15 internal continuation. But because of where we were as well, and because of all the things I keep repeating myself about, because I'm not really that confident in that move continuing, I just wanted to look for a quick 5R, fixed 5R, basically treating it as a counter trend move to get in and out, okay? So this was the most ideal level in which I was looking for price to come into, right? So obviously the extreme, it's liquidity. This is going to be your go-to. So you could even take a risk entry here, right? If you have risk entries in your plan, that's the sort of POI in which I look for because, you know, if price breaks this POI on the M1, it's probably going higher anyway. Okay, so at this point, let's say your alert goes off, price comes into M15 POI. What are you doing? Well, you're waiting for a bearish M1 change of character, okay? So if you're waiting for that, this would be your current active fractal low. So let's play price forward and see what happens. Okay, now you have an M1 change of character. Now this is previously where I would kind of see this and I would kind of go, oh, I'm probably a bit early here. This is kind of probably going to be a trap, but we've had the high time frame mitigation, we've had the bearish change of character, we've had the V shape, so you know there's enough confidence here. Let me take the trade. But as hopefully a lot of you will be aware, recently we're trying to focus a lot more on liquidity, and on the M15, right? When there is no inducement in the leg, so like I was saying earlier, when there's a straight push, Okay, there's no pullback here. There's no structural liquidity where you have a high where there can be liquidity behind it. When that hasn't happened and you've had a straight push, that's when we say there's no inducement in the M15 leg. So when that happens, what I almost always now want to see is I want to see a strong liquidation on the M1. So what is a strong liquidation? A strong liquidation is when you have very obvious equal highs, right, or equal lows if it was demand, like this, and then those get liquidated, then you get the chock. That's a strong liquidation if you take those highs. Very, very obvious equals. For me, these are not very obvious equals, right? It's just a pullback. Obvious equals, Tomas kind of has a good rule for that, and he says he wants to see it, like if you go on the M5, you should be able to see it. It should be very like a nice clear move away, a clear move up, a clear move away, and then it gets taken. Whereas if you look on the M5, there's nothing there, right? It's just a pullback. So for him, that wouldn't be obvious equals, and for me neither, right? It's just a pullback now. The other type of strong liquidation is if price breaks or sweeps a strong piece of structure. So what is a strong piece of structure? A strong piece of structure is something that did its job, that broke structure. So in that instance, what you want to see is this high here that I'm now drawing. This high breaks this low. Okay, it broke that low. So now there should be a lot more liquidity behind this high, right? Because it broke structure. It's a strong high. So now if price comes up and sweeps the liquidity behind that high, and then we come down and have the chock, now we've had a strong liquidation because we've swept a strong high that actually did something. Okay, so then when price comes back in, boom. Now we've had the liquidation. Now we can go. Okay. So what do we have in this instance? We don't have a strong liquidation and we don't have equal highs because what's happened? Price has just come up, it's just pulled back and it's continued the move. So this high here has not broken any structure. It's not a strong high, it's a weak high. Okay? So when price comes up and takes that now, there's been no strong liquidation. So if you look for shorts from within here, can you guess what's more likely to happen? Yep, you're going to become the liquidation, right? Early sellers now get liquidated. Why? Because this is a strong high because it broke the low. And that's exactly what we want to see because now early sellers are getting induced into the market and they get short and then all of that liquidity builds behind that high. So now that we have that, all right, I'm just going to draw on the liquidity. Now we've had our strong M1 liquidation into this level here. Okay, so now if you're looking for your bearish change of character, that would be the last candle to fail to break the previous candle's high. So let's look for that. Now let's evolve it up to here because that's the last candle to fail to break the previous candle's high. And now you come into here. So if you took the risk entry, now you'll be tagged in. If you're waiting for a bit more confirmation, you're waiting for this chock to go. Okay, now let's reassess. What do we have? We have higher time frame mitigation, our M15 level. Remember, what are we trying to do here on the M15? We're trying to play potentially the a quick move, continuing this movement here, right? Technically, this is a weak low, so I knew that could go, but I wasn't looking to target that. I just wanted to quick in and out move because I wasn't sure. I could see the potential that we could pull back here. And like I said, I'd missed that we'd had a bullish chock, and I missed that there was demand here. So this is technically demand. So I'm going to draw it on, but I didn't see that when I was getting into the trade. So I just kind of wanted to show you my perspective that I'd missed it. Okay, go back to the M1. So higher time frame mitigation, the refined level as well, which is another tick in the box. So I don't need price to hit this M1 level. It's just added confluence, okay? We've had the strong liquidation and we've had the change of character. And for me, that's a V shape, right? That's showing me orders being filled. It's boom, boom, right? That's enough momentum. There's no flip. So just take the extreme. Very, very simple and clean M1 entry model there. And I just about got tagged in on this on my broker. So it doesn't show that it gets tagged in on TradingView, but on my broker it did. So I was tagged into the trade and then just targeted 5R. Now, whilst I was in the trade and we got to around here, I moved to break even once we broke this low. But I noticed, I was like, oh, that looks like a very, very strong M1 level. You can see like a lot of momentum came into here as we broke up. And that's when I reassessed. And then that's when I noticed that we'd had that bullish M15 change of character that I keep talking about, this one here. And I noticed we were in M1 demand. And as I noticed that, boom, we started pulling back. And I thought, oh, you mug. I should have just noticed that was in there and just move my profit a little bit before 5R just for the sake of a few pips, right? And just get out there. So started pulling back. So I was like, right, probably messed that one up now, but at least I'm at break even. It is what it is. It's either going to be a break even or a win. Let's just see how it plays out. Fortunately, as you probably know, price then came down and stopped me out took me out for my profit. Okay. So that's perfect. Boom. So now this is where, if you want to have an insight into what my mind is thinking at this moment, I'm basically done for the session. I'm like, right, price is now sandwiched between supply and demand. It's not in a great area. Yes, the internal structure is still bearish, but I can make a good case for either or now. I can potentially see this demand holding and us breaking out higher. Do I want to get long against that supply mitigation from a weaker internal low? No. Do I want to keep shorting against that? No. So just let price break out, right? I don't want to do anything else. I know some people were looking at trades from within here, and you could get long trying to anticipate the price is going to break out. I didn't have that high conviction, so for me, I didn't see it as high probability. So I just chilled out. But yeah, as you can see now, price clearly shifts structure here on the M1, right? We come in, start to move out. Yeah, potentially you could look to get long from within here. But like I said, I just try to keep things relatively simple and clean as possible, and wait for structure on the M15 to shift, which is now what we get, right? So now we look on the M15 and we get the internal structure shifting bullish, right? Because we take this high. Now, some of you might have that as your swing structure. That's cool. It doesn't make a massive difference. But there we go. So now what am I expecting? Now that we have the internal structure shifting bullish, I'm looking for price to come back in to look for longs to play the swing pullback phase, okay? And obviously we can look for shorts from within here, look for the internal structure to shift bearish, and then so on and so forth if that's going to happen. Within the back of my mind that there is some potential, because of where we are on the 4-hour chart, remember, there is some potential that this 4-hour move could continue, right? We are bullish on the 4-hour chart. We have come into sort of, following the mitigations, this demand level, and we could continue higher. But I'm not really that confident because remember we have this flip here. So I wouldn't really want to push longs any further than that supply because I think it's more likely that we'll tap into here and dump. If we do break out higher, fine, happy days, then I'll look for the pullback and then we can look for longs there. Okay? So again, no need to try and get too tricky with your forecasts. But yeah, this is where you can then look for longs. So like I said, there was potential you could get in long early, but I didn't want to trade against this from a weak internal low. So wait for the breakout. Now you've got a flip. Here's your demand level. And this is a decent level. So again, if you want to take M15 entries, this is a level. You might want to improve your risk reward and take the EQ, right? Or into the distal, depending on where you want to target. Probably not the best risk reward there, to be honest, but that's the sort of thing you can look for, right? To play counter trend moves. So let's look for essentially price to pull back into here. Now there is an M15 supply level here. Show you it, which I was aware of. If you look at my pre-session analysis, I just had it drawn in here because I don't see it as super significant. It did lead to a break of structure, but I don't know, it's just not the best. So I reassess how price gets into that. Now, as price is coming in, yes, you can look for shorts, but I would just be playing the pullback phase if you wanted to play that into demand and expecting higher. Now, when we come into a level like this, okay, now I'm going to be a lot more aggressive to then look for that movement there, right? So just chilling, price pulls back, it mitigates the range, but it doesn't quite, or doesn't, I don't think it even quite hits that, but it doesn't hit this inside bar, so no problem. We come into this level and then we come back. So this is like perfect inducement this low for this level. Yes, there's a bearish change of character, which isn't ideal. So technically there is now M15 supply here, but it's just similar to what I was saying about this level here. What do chocks signal? They signal the start and end of internal pullbacks, right? If we've had an internal boss and we're expecting an internal pullback, what is likely going to happen for price to pull back, to have that internal pullback? It's likely going to form a bearish change of character, right? So when that happens and we get the bearish chock and we come into the extreme unmitigated demand, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't get long here, right? Because you expect that to happen. Now, is it ideal that you're trading right into supply? No. Could the supply hold? Yes. But the expectation now is that the internal structure is bullish. We pull back to demand. So now the expectation is we're going to target the weak internal high. So you do not really want to be shorting from here. And if you do like the longs, then don't be super scared about this. It's not ideal, right? It would be nice if it wasn't in the way. But when we're getting in the start of the internal trend change and the start of the pullback, we haven't quite come up to the EQ yet. We haven't quite come up to the 4-hour level of supply. This is when it can be okay to trade against it. But yeah, it's not ideal. There is definitely valid supply there. But I definitely wouldn't recommend shorting from here. These can play out, but you have to understand why the bearish shock occurred. It occurred to pull back, to have the internal pullback. And now that internal pullback has happened, down into M15 demand, this is now a weak high and we expect it to fail, okay? So not the super best trade in the world, but I was looking at it and was looking to take it. We obviously got the liquidation of that M15 low, which is decent. Let me bring this back a little bit on the M1 and talk through this price action. So as price comes in and we get the high time frame mitigation, what's the bare minimum I need to see? I need to see a bullish change of character on the M1, right? So that's the bare minimum I need to see. Ideally as well, it's a bit more aggressive of a chock. It'd be nice to see that high go, right? Get a clear shift in structure there. And we also have this level of supply. We can draw an inside bar, either or. Doesn't make a massive difference. But if you did draw an inside bar, I would include the high of this week anyway here. So we come in, we pull back. All right. Now we have the bullish change of character. So technically we've had a mitigation, we have liquidated that low, and we've had a bullish shock. But where are you going to enter, right? There's no real valid demand here. This supply hasn't properly failed, right? The high hasn't even gone. Hopefully you can see why this should be way too aggressive for me to want to jump in this instance. Now, this low here, what did this low achieve? Well, it did technically cause a shock. So we know there's going to be nice, decent liquidity below it. Now price has come down. And you can see it just swept this low. So now we've had a strong liquidation, okay? Now price pushes up. Technically, it's not the best flip in the world because price did come up into supply and it did wick the low, but it didn't really cause price to close below it. So depends on how you want to define it in your plan, but I'm pretty much happy enough to call that flip. So from the top of the reaction to the bottom of the reaction, anywhere you can enter from within there. I want it to be a little bit more refined and enter within there, but unfortunately it didn't tag me in. Some of you, I know you look at FVG, fair value gaps and imbalance and all of that. Price potentially rejected off that and continued higher. Or essentially, if you want to view it as a demand range, that's what we've reacted off. And yeah, price went to the upside. So even in this instance, I was just looking for a quick 5-hour move to target that high, past that high, but yeah, didn't get tagged in the end. And it is what it is. So yeah, plenty of opportunities to be quite aggressive in here. Could have potentially taken some longs, etc., but I prefer to try and trade with the alignment of the M15 as much as possible. And now we're shooting to the upside. So it'll be interesting to see on the 4-hour chart, is this flip going to hold? And are we going to get another move to at least down to here and then potentially get that move or potentially push lower? Or is this larger zone, you can refine it to the wick, is this zone going to hold now? Are we going to get a fair of that supply and push higher, right? It's a bit of a battle. We're sandwiched and we can look for the target of that week high up into this level, potentially into next week for the larger move. Remains to be seen. But yeah, hopefully you guys took some value from that. And yeah, have a good New York session if you're trading it, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.